told him I can't be laughing when we start. How long has it been?
About 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
Welcome back to Calvary Life. It's been a few weeks we've taken off, but Lord willing, we'll be back in the routine of a weekly podcast called Calvary Life. I'm Paul Thompson.
I'm Charles Uptain, and we're here for you as in the members of Calvary. That's what this podcast is really for, is to give you a glimpse of our thought patterns and things we do when we talk about Calvary as a church. But it's also for anybody that might be interested in just what pastors think and how we're trying to do church here at Calvary. But we have a good guest with us today. We're excited about this conversation. We have Josh Robertson with us. Josh, introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Josh Robertson. For those of you that have been in kids worship, you've probably seen me also participating with Zach at some VBS stuff, but I'm an educator here in the Houston County school system.
Yeah, this is a challenging area to talk about, education. And I'm sure everybody that has children, of course, has thoughts, opinions, concerns about school. We're right now at the beginning of a new school year. And, I wanted to start with this, Josh. Tell me some of the challenges for Christians. I'm talking about committed Christians who are not like you, are not shy about their faith, not undercover sort of Christians, but active, legit, bold Christians. Tell me some of the challenges you face and other Christians who are educators face in public education today.
Yeah, and I know this may or may not be kind of a popular opinion, but here in Alabama, we're kind of sheltered from a lot of the problems that, you hear about in mainstream news. As far as your critical race theory, a lot of the transgender issues. While we have some of those, and we experience some of those, they aren't as widespread, and we don't face as many just head-on challenges related to those things, but they do exist. I think additionally, you have to be careful sometimes about how you cover certain content. For example, in a science classroom, there may be stuff that's in a state standard that would ask you to cover beliefs and theories that you don't necessarily believe in or feel are scientifically proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, so aren't in that scientific law realm. So I think those are a lot of the issues that we're starting to see, just to name a few. However, knowing that kind of where we are in Dothan, or I know specifically in the Houston County schools, we're just not, a lot of the challenges that you would hear about on, say, Fox News or some of these other news sources, we're not facing those major issues yet, but that's not to say that they aren't coming.
Let me give you an example of something specific. So this is, there's an organization called the Houston County Faith and Freedom Committee. And I received some information from them. And this was about the realm of education, and they're trying to be very proactive about materials and things that are in our public libraries, for instance. But this was part of their newsletter, or part of a bit of information they produced. It says, according to the Wall Street Journal, the National Education Association put out a summer reading list for students recommending books like Genderqueer, with color sketches graphically depicting sexual dialogue, and other LGBTQ plus books like Ready Player One, with explicit descriptions of blow-up sex dolls, online brothels, etc. Also recommended, even for elementary age children, are books like My Princess Boy, Jacob's New Dress, which are all advocating for gay or transgender. So help a parent or a church member understand, to what degree does that sort of thing show up here and have impact on our students here?
So I can tell you specifically with some of those titles that you've mentioned, we are partnered through the State Department of Education with Alabama Virtual Library. Alabama Virtual Library then partners with another program that I don't think they know as much about. That's called, it's a book provider. They don't necessarily have book titles, full titles with the full book in there, but they do have reading materials for those. And last year it was kind of brought to our attention that our students were one click away from seeing titles like Jacob and his new dress. I
Dress,
think that's
yeah.
what it was called. There was also one specifically dealt with a family of penguins, which was definitely geared towards probably a second grader. And it was two same-sex penguins that wanted to have a child penguin or an egg, and they realized they never had an egg, so they sat on a stone. And one day, a zookeeper saw this, and it's just little things like that I think they're trying to infiltrate. Just last year, 2 years ago, the State Department of Education, the Reading Task Force that's in Alabama, who's tied to the Literacy Act, which some of you may be familiar with that, some of you may not. The goal of that is to have all students reading on grade level by third grade. They suggested two materials for grades kindergarten through 3. Those two materials, one of those was through a publisher called CKLA. The other was through a publisher called Open Court. In the CKLA material, there were things in the second grade content that would have pictures in the stories of same-sex couples holding hands, going to the zoo, and you could tell. It was open. So these were things in second grade. What I could tell you from where I work with Houston County is our superintendent saw that, and we got rid of all of those samples, and it was no longer an option for us to use. There are some systems around that did adopt that, and that's what they use. I think some of them have tried to eliminate that material out of those books, which is a lot of work. But we see that. One of the things that we have to do, we have specific guidelines that allow our parents to kind of challenge material that's
I was
being
going to ask you
used.
about that. What
Yeah.
sort of involvement are you seeing from parents, and are they, for lack of a better word, are they allowed to be involved? Do they have legitimate access to influence and involvement?
Yeah, I think our system has a form that parents can fill out to challenge anything that's being read in their classroom. We also have a process for approving materials that teachers may think may be challenging. We have a movie approval form. We have an approved reading list. Some of these are classics, but we know this. Classics aren't, some of these concepts aren't missing from some classic literature that have been read in schools for a long time. But our parents do have an opportunity to fill things out, to bring those concerns before a committee. The committee will look at those and turn their findings over to the board, and our board kind of has final say. So what I can say is our board is very supportive of our parents and kind of wanting to protect our students at the same times from some of these outside influences that, if you notice, it's like anything, they're just slow. They will, second grade, you have a book about two penguins. You pick it up, it looks really good and innocent, and then as you start to see the story that plays out, and this is something that, is slow. They're trying to, it starts with a picture book, and then where does it end? And so I think our parents do a good job. We've had a couple of concerns, and we've eliminated some of the material that we've read in some of our middle schools as late as last year. We, basically sent home parent permission forms because there was a piece of literature that was brought to question. So I think our parents have a pretty strong say-so in what goes on with their students, and we listen to those concerns.
So the best way for a parent to be involved with that is to be paying attention, I guess, be involved, be active in who you're choosing to be on the school board, that sort of thing. I wanted to talk about this kind of concept for a moment. I certainly believe 100% that our public school system is a great mission field. And I don't think many or any of us really would argue that. It's a mission field for sure. What I want to push back on a little bit, and this is something I hear different people say, that our students can be the missionaries there. I'm really concerned that too many of our parents mistakenly think that they're going to send their kids into this world, this secular environment, and thinking that their kids are going to be salt and light when the opposite happens. I think the real missionaries in the school system are folks like you. So, for us as a church, I'd like our folks to consider and think about, it's great for us to see more and more Calvary people being involved in the secular sphere, in education. I applaud our teachers who are teaching in public schools, folks like you who are in administration. But maybe you can speak to that a little bit, just maybe to dispel the notion, at least for elementary age. Now, maybe if you've got a well-formed high school student who knows what he believes and is grounded in the faith and is committed to living that out publicly, even in a challenging space, that person can be a missionary. I don't doubt that. Maybe even a more mature, more advanced middle schooler. I really kind of push back with the notion that you think that your kids are just simply going to go in elementary school and be these world changers. No, they're the mission field there. So I guess what we should be praying for and thinking about is how do we encourage more of our folks to be involved like you are?
Yeah, I think it's I'm a product of public school. That was really the only option that I had growing up, and I think prior to me making a decision to go into education, there were at times where I would waver back and forth about wanting to be a youth pastor. There were times where I would want to do something else. One of the things that I realized was education was an avenue for me to still have a ministry, to be a part of athletics, and then to try to shape minds to hopefully pursue the same thing that I am. So those were some of the things that kind of brought me into education. What I can tell you is this: even in an elementary school, this isn't to scare anyone, but your kids are going to face, our kids in our elementary schools are facing things that we can't control. We can't control what a student brings from home because we don't have 24/7 access to their home. We get them for majority of the day, but that time that they're at home, we can't control what show they watched and what words they're hearing on those shows, what they're being exposed to when parents leave their children alone on cell phones. Because you all know this, and I think most people would. You're a click away from ruining a child's innocence on a cell phone. So we can't control those things. So I do agree with you. I think elementary school, it's that. I don't think that's a reality for them. I think high school, you can have some kind of influence in what you do. And this was a small thing. One of the ways when I was in high school is at the end of practice every day, I led our football team in a prayer, not the Lord, not just the Lord's Prayer, which everybody does and says, and most of them don't even get the words right. But I led our team in an actual prayer every day to end in practice. In college, I was able to start a Bible study with our football team. So I think as children get older, you have the opportunity to do that. I would agree with you. Younger, not so much. And as a teacher, I think a lot of times people think as a teacher, I can't push my faith on anyone else. What I can tell you is this: when I was in the classroom, and I can't really get in trouble for this now because it was a long time ago. But when I used to work at Carroll High School, and there would be times where I would kind of stop class and we would just have life discussions. And in those life discussions, my faith would come up, and I would have the opportunity to share with those students. Not only that, but you also have the ability to create student groups and student clubs where you can have influence on those students as well. And then there have been times since I've been in administration where students have come to my office and they've had some big, major life-changing issues going on. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss the opportunity to put your faith into those conversations. There have been probably more than a few students who have left my office that got something they probably didn't expect to get coming in. But at the same time, I think as adults, we have to get to the point where we realize if, this is who I am, and if I don't take these opportunities, there are eternal consequences to that, not just worldly consequences. And so I think that's one of the things we have to have as educators, especially in a public school setting. We have to have that eternal view in mind as opposed to just the right now view, which I think too often we get sucked into the right now and we miss what the eternal either rewards or consequences could be.
if you're coaching up kids, this is, I guess, first full week of school and everything's getting back into normal routine. If you're coaching them up, maybe starting with elementary, working your way up to middle school and even to high school, what would you say to these students that are starting back school, Christian students, and the kind of adversity they're going to face, whether that's intellectual academic adversity, cultural worldview adversity, or just the moral things they're going to be exposed to? Like you mentioned, it's not likely to come officially. It's more likely to come in those conversations in the hallway or in the lunchroom or on the bus or after school, that sort of thing. What sort of counsel would you give to them to keeping their faith in those settings, and maybe starting with those young ones who are just very young in their faith? It's just developing, and then those who are trying to make a difference, like you spoke of your own high school experience.
I think the one thing that I would tell anybody, no matter what stage you are, is, and this was kind of we've been through Hebrews at the church, and part of the theme of Hebrews is stand firm, stand strong, continue to press on. So for the high school students, I would say, when you encounter these things, press on. You talked about this Sunday. One of the points of the message this Sunday was, it's worth it. It'll be worth it. It may not seem like it right now. It may be tough right now, but know that this world will soon pass, and we'll be one day in eternity worshiping our Creator forever. So that for the high school students. For the elementary students, the challenge really would go out to the parents. Push your elementary students to really know what they believe and understand why they believe that, which I know sounds kind of stretching it for elementary age students, but if they don't know why and they don't understand the why behind it, when those challenges come, it's going to be that much easier to fall back. Middle school, I think, is probably the most challenging age group, and just because that's where you have hormones, going up and down, you have bodies changing. You begin. That's when you fall into temptations, a lot of times that's where they start. So for those, I would really, middle school age kids, I would urge them to have some strong accountability, whether that be with a parent. Our middle schools have D groups. Our high school age students help run our middle school D groups. Have some accountability there, where when you struggle with things or things come up, you have some trusted person that you can go to that will give you godly advice, not just good worldly advice. Have somebody you can go to when those things come up, that you can ask those questions of. For me, this is, my parents did a great job, but I got a lot of my worldly education on the back of a school bus. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons my wife said our kids will never ride a school bus now. But
Yeah, I can remember those school bus days, and that was a long time ago. Yeah. That was a different generation.
Yeah, so I think that would just be my recommendation. Would stand firm and know why you believe what you say you believe. Don't just take it as somebody else's and try to pass it as your own. Make sure you know.
I think one huge challenge in all this, I want to speak to how we can encourage and help, but really want to challenge parents in this area, is at the very least, your responsibility is to be aware. I did student ministry for a number of years, and it was always surprising to me, sometimes even shocking to me, how little some of our parents knew of what their students were being taught. But more than just the curriculum, maybe they knew what subjects they were in, what classes they were taking, but didn't know the specifics, didn't know the content when it came along. But way beyond that, they didn't know the kind of conversations they were having and things they're being exposed to. So at the very least is to be aware. But more than that, I think the challenge to all of our parents, whether your kids are in Christian school, private school, public school, is to not cede the ultimate education to anybody. Particularly the dads. I really just want to challenge those dads to lead out in their homes, because don't sub out the training of a worldview. And whether it's coming officially through the curriculum and through the teaching from the from a teacher's podium or just the culture and the, I guess, all the combined teaching of all your peers and all the influences they have, a worldview is being shaped. And it's very difficult to change that worldview once formed through middle school and high school. And so parents take responsibility for that. And I would say the same thing. I know, Josh, you're in the public school sector, but for our students and parents and families that are in private school sector, being in a Christian school is not an adequate substitute for being in a church and for being faithfully trained up at home. You can't just seed that out to somebody else. And Charles, I'm sure you saw the same in years of children's ministry, people just basically seeding that over. My kids will learn their reading and writing, et cetera, history, whatever. They'll learn that in school, and they'll learn their Jesus stuff and their Bible stuff. They'll learn that at church on Sundays, and we can use our time for, whatever else.
Yeah, our culture always says it's just American culture is you give it to the experts. You send them to, if they're going to do baseball, then the coach is really responsible for all the baseball. If you want them to take piano lessons, then the piano teacher is responsible for all that. And we've done the same thing in church life, that we've tried to say, well, we'll let the church handle all the religious education, or if we go to a Christian school, we'll let the Christian school handle all the religious education. And me as a parent, I'm not an expert, so I don't have to do it. But I don't think we get that pass as parents. We've got to be that first influencer on our children. And I would speak to what Josh said earlier about influences of friends. I don't care if they go to public school or private school. Not everybody in a Christian school is a strong believer. And the stuff they're seeing at home, the stuff they're a part of, comes to those kids the same way that it does at the public school. So there may not be school buses, but there's plenty of conversations and things happening at the private schools where you just have to be aware, like you said, and have to help guide your children at what's right and what's wrong at all ages.
And I will say this, before the position I'm in, I was a principal at Wicksburg High School, and it's on campus. It's K through 12. After my first January to May, it got split into an elementary and a high school. But I can tell you the benefit of there is there. I count on two hands and more the number of teachers that professed faith, but you could also tell they were living it. They had two very active churches that were Pilgrim Home Baptist Church, Brother Alan Singley, and his family.
Shout out to Alan. Hope you're listening. If not, you're missing the shout out, brother.
His family was very active. His church was very active with us. And Bay Springs Baptist Church was very active with us. And Brother Cliff Morrison there. So, those are opportunities that even at public school, this would be more to like people at the administrative level. You have the opportunity to allow those organizations access to your school and to your students. Why not? What do you have to lose, even if it's just them coming in and doing things and providing for your teachers? Allow them access, and you never know what will come from that.
The sad truth for us here, even in our local context, and the schools that we want to be involved in and have opportunity to be involved in are more, Dothan City schools surrounding us. But the sad truth is we have far more access than we take advantage of, and that's just the truth. We've been invited on multiple occasions for consecutive years to tutor, to host, to be involved, and we just don't have enough people stepping up. So the opportunities are there for us, for sure, as well. I just want to remind the parents that are listening, as you're thinking about school, whatever school you're in, is your responsibility is first. Your responsibility for the education of your children is first. And the most important part of that education, I think, ultimately, is the spiritual side, and not just teaching them to accept Jesus into their heart and believe that their sins are forgiven, but to really train them up to have a biblical worldview that can withstand the challenges, because it's not just the challenges they're going to face in elementary school or middle school or high school. It's the absolute onslaught they're going to face when they get out into college, wherever that is. And to know why we believe what we believe and how that affects how we live, because otherwise it becomes a very disconnected, disjointed thing that just doesn't hold up. And so, training them in that worldview and taking responsibility for it Josh, speak to this real quick. You alluded to it with a little bit of time we've got left. Speak to a little bit of how the church can, and I alluded to that some. We have opportunities to tutor and volunteer and things like that. But how can the church family who's listening, how can we be supportive of not just our students, but how can we be supportive of our staff, our faculty, our educators, our administrators that are in public school setting?
I know this is kind of cliche, but the number one thing is lift them up in prayer. Cover them in prayer. I can think of even sitting. If I'm sitting right here, I can view my Sunday school class, and it's like praying for each and every one of those students. Even though I see them usually once, twice a week, but that's something that I can do every morning because generally they sit in the same place. I think sometimes it's just taking the opportunity to get to know what some of the struggles are, not just trying to keep yourself in your bubble, but talk to people, find out what their struggles are. Because when you ask them that, a lot of times, educators, they're going to tell you, they're going to spill the beans, and then you're going to have a lot of things that you can take back and pray for them. Other things are just really making yourself available. You've mentioned kind of some of the tutoring stuff. While schools do have budgets and they do have funds set aside for those things, the opportunity for someone to go and have life-on-life interaction with some of these students, generally the students who are receiving tutoring services are the ones that aren't getting those types of interactions at home. And so that's an opportunity for someone to have real life-on-life opportunities to just really, eventually you may have the opportunity to share the gospel, but really just to show someone love, just to show them that they are loved and that they are cared about, and that they don't have to accept the status quo. They don't have to just be average, that they can do these things, and people are here to help support them. Aside from that, teacher appreciation is always a great time to help. I know a lot of times churches will reach out for that, but then those are great because parents take care of those times, but it's those times in between that, where a little goodie bag of candy every once in a while goes a long way, a biscuit in the morning, and really a lot of times just a smiling face. If a school will allow someone in, go. Even if it's just to walk around and say hello in the morning, to walk through and let the teachers know that you are praying for them. I think those kind of things go a long way, because a lot of times in education, it's probably a lot like in ministry. It's very much delayed gratification.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit on the mission trip. You don't get
Yeah.
a chance to see this often, and at least not until many years out.
And that's, I think, like with me, some of the best things that I've ever had are kids that I taught, 6, 7 years ago, who are adults now, who have children my children's age, and they send me messages and tell me how much they appreciated me, and how much. Not that I made everything, but how much they appreciate the fact that we pushed them, and that we did show them what they were capable of. So I think more than anything, it's just support too. Just be there to support them, be there to listen to them, ask them about work. Too oftentimes we don't want to do that because it could get messy. You never know what somebody will unload on you, but ask them.
From a Calvary side, our contact for the two schools that we try to influence the most here at Girard's is Tommy Perry. So, if you're out there and listening and think, well, I think I could do some of that stuff. Tommy's always got opportunities in those schools to read, to help. We've started doing a backpack program where we send food home over the weekends, and we have a class that does that. There's all kinds of opportunities that he would love to have more volunteers to take advantage of. So if you're interested and you're hearing this, Tommy Perry's the contact guy that would love to put you to work.
And in the interest of fairness, you mentioned you were a product of public school. I was too. I graduated from public high school, but I did spend 3 years, very formative years of my life, middle school in a Christian school. And so for our private school educators, Christian school educators, you're working in a mission field too. we're not oblivious to the fact that just because a student's in a Christian school that he has a Christian worldview or comes from a Christian family even. I know that the reason I was in Christian schools because I was a little bit beyond the bounds of discipline of public school. So I was sort of sent there like a penal colony. But, God worked it out in his sovereignty. But, I want you to know we respect what you're doing and your mission field to students. And, of course, we want to affirm our homeschooling parents, too, that you've made that choice and that sacrifice to invest in them. I think the ultimate challenge really is the same for every parent. You are responsible for your child's education, and the most important education you can give them is the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the truth, and the virtue that accompanies living as a follower of Christ, and give them a worldview that will stand up to the challenge of this age. So, again, hope you've heard some things that will encourage you today, maybe make you step out a little bit and do something with it. Talk to Tommy about volunteering. If you know the teachers in our congregation already, then you don't need a program to encourage them or do something for them. Send them a note or whatever, some of the things you heard Josh speak of, but just let them know you're thinking about them, praying for them. And if you want some more ideas, I'm sure Josh would be happy to share them with you, or some of these other teachers would too. Calvary is blessed in that sense. And so I just want to say thank you to all of our people. And I don't know who will be listening to this, but I want to say thank you to all of our people who are in education, from preschool all the way up through high school and beyond, and who've chosen that as a field. And Josh, not trying to shine your shoes, but I know you didn't do that for the riches it would bring, the fame or accolades. You didn't do that because it was easy. You did that because you have a call to benefit the lives of, improve the lives of, develop the lives of young people. And so that's a great calling. And so we appreciate all of you who are involved in that. And we want to partner with you the best that we can in helping you, staying firm if you're a student, helping encourage you to live for Christ there, helping you as a parent to know the issues and know how to respond to challenges and things, and learn how to explain your faith to your own children, learn basic apologetics and theology so you can help develop a worldview in your children. And we want to encourage you just, as always, be proactive, be involved. It's a pretty poor thing on our part, I think, if we just complain about the condition of things or the status of things, but we don't take every opportunity to be involved, to be difference makers, to get in there, get in the game, and help make a difference. So, Josh, man, thanks for hanging out with us and sharing stuff with us. You got any last parting words of wisdom?
I don't know about that, but no, thank you guys for having me. It was kind of enjoyable to get to talk about this.
Kind of enjoyable.
I feel like I don't get to nerd. I'm a former science teacher, so I'm a nerd at heart. So I don't get to nerd out on these kind of things often. So anytime I get the opportunity to nerd out, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Speaking of former science, when I was in middle school, that was where I first had my first, I guess, brick wall of worldview. Was in a seventh grade science class when I read about evolution. Yep. And so, just how did you handle that kind of stuff as a science teacher?
So this is I know we were kind of coming to an end, but this is where
this is good stuff.
This is where I was a former chemistry teacher, and I think the one unit that I think the reason that it became one of my favorite units to teach is it dealt with the atom, and it went through all of the atomic theories, starting all the way back with Democritus, and kind of went from Democritus to Aristotle. And the interesting thing there is when Aristotle came out, he actually kind of subverted some ideas that Democritus had that were right. And so there was always an opportunity there to tell my students, Aristotle was more popular. People took his viewpoints. It has now set chemistry back about 2,000 years.
Wow.
Based on where we could have been had we taken some of Democritus's ideas and run with it. But then going from that just to the things that people discovered about the atom, and to be able to tell students about that, and then you get into periodic table and periodic trends, and you talk about, guys, these things, people say that these things happened from lightning striking some puddle of primordial soup that had the building blocks to life. And that was my opportunity to tell my students kind of my belief. This didn't happen by chance. Yeah. There's no way that these atoms line up in this order, in this way, and they interact this way together by chance. And so I think it was a lot of times when I got to do those is when I felt like, here's my shot, I got to shoot it, you know? And so it's like, shoot my shot, and, you know, I never got called to the carpet on it.
Well, I wish I'd have had a science teacher that took time to, you know, try to explain that instead of just letting you read it in a book and have a test on it, and left you with all these questions. And I didn't have the family background to help me with that. You know, I was pretty much on my own when it comes to my education. You know, my mom and dad worked, and they were like, get good grades. You know, that was as much as we talked about school. So I appreciate teachers that go that extra mile.
And that's a great example of kind of what I'm talking about with worldview, is for those parents to be involved, even if a teacher's saying the opposite, even if a teacher's espousing a very Darwinistic, you know, evolutionary, whatever, secular worldview. That's an opportunity to say, okay, let's talk about what is and what we can see and what science teaches us, but let's also talk about where there's a divergence here to now what we don't know, what we can't see, which is actually not scientific, which is philosophical or even religious, and say this is a worldview issue versus this is a scientific issue. Yeah. And I was thinking about that, the influence of godly teachers, and I guess I was really blessed, and I don't expect any of my old peers from high school days to be listening to this, but now as I think about it, I had a succession of 3 outspoken Christian teachers, one in biology in the 10th grade, one in chemistry in the 11th grade, and one in physics in the 12th grade. And particularly, I remember Mr. Clayton in the 12th grade, pretty much every Friday, we were going to get some sort of short sermon at the end of our class that Friday before we headed off into the weekend, you know, warning us about the sins that would easily beset us. But, you know, I look back at these guys steeped in science. They love sciences, but they also were faithful churchmen. They love the Lord. They love students. And, you know, thank God for them.
Yeah.
And thank God for guys like you. Well, appreciate you all listening. We got some more good stuff coming up in the weeks to come. I won't preview it just in case something changes and wacky things happen. It's all as the Lord wills, but we've got some plans coming up to address some good things and to answer some questions that you've sent our way. But if you've got more, if you got some things you just really want to hear about, we're going to talk about those things. But some of those themes coming up in weeks to come, some thoughts on eschatology, the end times. Had some good conversations and feedback. What should we make of all this extraterrestrial stuff we're seeing right now, and these manifestations that we're seeing, and space travel and all these kind of things? Does the Bible speak to these things? And we're going to talk about that. And how do we prepare ourselves for those sort of things coming? This next week, we're going to be talking about women in ministry and women in church life and women in service, and where do women fit in God's economy for the local church? And we want to address that and encourage the women in our church to do that. So those are some of the things coming. So I hope you'll help spread the word and share this, like this, help us get this out there. And I think it'll be a benefit. So Charles, thanks. Josh, thanks. As always, I'm Paul Thompson, and we are for God first. We are for Dothan, the city where God has placed us. But we're also for the world, and we want to see God glorified in every space. So thanks for listening today.